The trade went down on February 10th, and immediately all eyes were on March 10th. That would be the first meeting between the Nets and Sixers since Brooklyn and Philadelphia made the deal that sent James Harden to the Sixers and Ben Simmons to the Nets.
Here today's superstars, I played against real superstars. These bombs y'all call players today, making all this damn money. So,
I'm with you, Chuck.
man, when you get beat like that, you don't even want to talk about no passing nobody.
Why you let Harden come here, man? Not welcome.
1 month ago, an absolute landscape-altering trade was made in the NBA. A trade that in the beginning of the season, we would have never imagined happening. And ultimately it did. A trade that we thought Daryl Morey was going to wait until this offseason to execute, and a trade that ultimately happened. The interesting part about said trade, when James Harden was traded to the Philadelphia 76ers from the Brooklyn Nets for Ben Simmons, and of course there were other assets involved, is that 1 month later, which would eventually become yesterday, the two teams that executed this trade of superstars would get to face one another. And I wish I could sit here and tell you that, man, it didn't disappoint.
Because it really did.
But before we get to the content, make sure you drop a like, subscribe, and turn on our notifications to help the channel grow. We're giving away $500 to one of my followers on Instagram. And now that we get all that out of the way, cue the intro. I think we could all agree on one thing, and that's that banks are extremely sleazy. I mean, they charge like $35 for overdraft fees. They'll charge you for opening a checking and savings account, and they definitely don't give you cash back on debit card purchases. Pretty much, a bank is trying to take money out of your account, which is why I partnered with Albert. Unlike banks, Albert's actually going to save you money. Instead of just opening up a traditional savings account and hoping that you remember to put some money into it, Albert looks at your income and expenses and sees what money you could save. They offer 5 to 20% cash back from places like McDonald's, Starbucks, and Walmart. And the best part is they have your back so much that they'll spot you up to $250 when you need it. They'll pay you up to 2 days early. And most importantly, they'll help you manage your money with one of my favorite features on the app, Genius, which is a team of financial experts that Albert has that they call geniuses that will look at your situation and help you come up with a plan and answer any of your questions if you get stuck. And right now, when you go to albert.com/TFM and open up a checking account and connect a qualifying direct deposit, you'll get $150. That's albert.com/TFM to download the Albert app, open up a checking account, and connect a qualifying direct deposit to get $150. And thank you, Albert, for today's sponsorship. Mike check 1212. What's going on, everybody? Last night, the Brooklyn Nets faced off against the Philadelphia 76ers, and up until this point, it has been nothing but sunshine and rainbows for the Sixers ever since acquiring James Harden. I mean, people have been comparing James Harden and Joel Embiid to Kobe and Shaq, and I'm not here to debate who's better or who's worse, but the way they play basketball and the harmony between an all-star guard and a transcendent center like Joel Embiid kind of gives me nice little flashbacks to Kobe and Shaq. Not saying which one is better, but just the play style between the two of them. However, unfortunately, yesterday things weren't nearly as harmonious. Now, the day started with the Brooklyn Nets arriving to Philadelphia, and make no mistake, Philadelphia 76ers fans didn't waste any time in reminding Ben Simmons about their disdain for him.
You getting the blues on? Blues on day. Thanks for James, man.
And to be honest, they've been doing this ever since the conclusion of the Atlanta Hawks series last year in the Eastern Conference semifinals. Philadelphia 76ers fans have been disliking Ben Simmons for quite some time at this point.
Ben Simmons picked up the loose ball at the other end, and that's the only time he's touched it, and the chorus of boos begin.
And then came time for the game, which you need to understand, by the time the game started, I was thinking that the Philadelphia 76ers were probably going to win this one. I mean, when you just take a look at the momentum they've had recently since acquiring James Harden versus how the Brooklyn Nets have been recently, which, bear in mind, if the season was to end today, the Brooklyn Nets would be a play-in team. They're 3-7 in their last 10 games prior to facing off against the Philadelphia 76ers as well. It seemed like everything was pointing towards James Harden Harden absolutely beating down Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant in his new home of Philadelphia. And the exact opposite happened. I mean, the one narrative surrounding James Harden is that he doesn't show up to big games, and typically this is the narrative that follows him throughout the playoffs. And to be honest, it's not necessarily the most fair thing, because if you just look at his statistics throughout the playoffs, he plays masterful basketball throughout the playoffs as well, with the exception of last year because he was coming off of a hamstring injury. But unfortunately, when you've won MVP scoring titles and have dominated statistically and more recently passed Reggie Miller for three-pointers made, but still haven't won a championship despite having multiple former All-Stars and multiple future Hall of Famers as your co-stars, then unfortunately that is the narrative that is created. I'm not saying it's fair or not, but it just is. And last night it seems like that narrative was proven true. Now, bear in mind, the Philadelphia 76ers just acquired James Harden, but it's kind of concerning that James Harden came in, shot 3 of 17 from the field, and only scored 11 points in his 28 minutes played. Now, what's even more concerning, and to even further prove my point, is unfortunately James Harden wasn't able to impact the game the way he was able to impact the game the last time he had a horrible shooting night, which was actually the previous game he played, which was against the Chicago Bulls, where he went 5 of 15 from the field, but he also had 14 assists to go with that. But in this instance, they weren't able to get so lucky, and ultimately it would result in the Brooklyn Nets beating down the Philadelphia 76ers without Ben Simmons even playing. Now, I personally am starting to be a little concerned about the fact that Ben Simmons has yet to play a game with the Brooklyn Nets. It's a recycled narrative from last year where Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant, two remarkable scorers that know how to play with each other at this point.
That's what she said.
But when does Ben Simmons come in and learn how to play with Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant? Are they just going to throw him out there in the beginning of the playoffs? When is Ben Simmons going to return? I personally felt like it would have been exciting to see him return last night, but to be honest, if you are going through mental health struggles, chances are that you aren't going to be able to return to the court in a place that made you feel extremely uncomfortable, where the fans were booing you despite you being on that team. So at the same time, I get it, but hopefully he makes his return soon, because I feel like if the Brooklyn Nets really want to surprise some teams in the playoffs this year, they need Ben Simmons to come in and play some games with Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant, at least towards the end of the season. Now, that's what happened on the basketball court. And of course, James Harden didn't put together his best showing.
And like I say, the thing about being a great player, you don't have to play great. You just can't stink up the joint. And he stunk up the joint tonight.
This was a game that was definitely circled on James Harden's calendar and on Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving's calendar, despite them having nothing but nice things to say about him, except this jab that KD took about James Harden in transition.
Random, they're not a really good transition team, or they don't make second and third efforts. You know, sometimes we make 4 or 5 passes, so we took advantage of that.
But what really was surprising was there is another narrative surrounding James Harden, where, for lack of a better way of saying it, the man just likes to have a good time. I mean, when he was trying to get traded out of Houston, he started hitting clubs more, and he started getting filmed at clubs more specifically without a mask during the beginning of the COVID pandemic, which kind of triggered some people. And ultimately, it's not necessarily the greatest look when your team is trying to do whatever it takes to push to the top of the Eastern Conference. So it was a little interesting that James Harden, after a horrible showing and probably the most crucial game for the Philadelphia 76ers so far, against a team that, of course, I don't think it was their toughest opponent so far, because that would have been the Chicago Bulls, and they beat the Chicago Bulls. But it is definitely a game that could potentially cause James Harden to lose his composure, because he's playing against his former teammates. Now, the end of it wasn't necessarily the greatest. Of course, Philadelphia 76ers fans would leave the game early, and then James Harden would go and party with Travis Scott and Lil Baby. And what's interesting about this is Travis Scott has been out of the public eye ever since the Astroworld tragedy. Lil Baby and James Harden are practically in a relationship. I'm not saying that James Harden isn't allowed to have fun, but you have to admit, it's a pretty interesting look. I'm gonna make sure that I make this absolutely clear. There is nothing wrong with the fact that James Harden wanted to go and party with Travis Scott and Lil Baby after absolutely getting decimated in a game. But when Kyrie Irving just kicked your on a basketball court, I don't know. Philadelphia 76ers fans are gonna have to get used to this.
But tonight was good for us, man. We got kicked, and
You know, since I've been here, everything has been, you know, sweet and you know, we've been winning games. And so tonight was good for us and we get an opportunity to come down to reality.
Ultimately, I don't think it's that big of a deal.
I don't think this is going to ruin the Philadelphia 76ers chances of making it to the Eastern Conference Finals
or making it to the NBA Finals. I think this is something Daryl Morey was even prepared to deal with at some point or another. But I don't know. Let me know in the comment section down below what you guys think about all this. Aside from that, I'm your boy Mike. I'm dropping our mic until our next upload.